What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event, playing for you on the digital wheels of steel. Yes, I play music for people. And I do karaoke shows. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Use the hashtag What Makes You Famous to find it everywhere. Let's learn together on What Makes You Smarter. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, the Spanish flu. More people died in the 1918 flu pandemic than in World War I. Blue lips, blackened skin, blood leaking from noses and mouths, coughing fits so intense they ripped muscles, crippling headaches, and body pains that felt like tortures. These were the symptoms of a disease that was first recorded in Haskell County, Kansas, 100 years ago in January 1918. Kansas, the illness spread quickly, not only throughout the U.S., but across the world. Eventually, if misleadingly, it became known as Spanish flu. And while its effects on the body were awful, mortality rate was truly terrifying. During a pandemic that lasted 2 years from its outbreak in the U.S., between 50 million and 100 million people across the globe died. Spanish flu killed more people than any pandemic disease before, including the 6th century plague of Justinian, the medieval Black Death, the AIDS pandemic, or Ebola. The First World War, which was ending just as the flu took hold, killed barely a third as many people with bullets and bombs as the H1N1 strain of influenza did with coughs and shivers. There's a photograph from the archives of Oakland Public Library in California. It shows nurses of the American Red Cross preparing surgical dressings for use on flu patients during the winter of 1918 and 1919. Colorizing on the photograph reveals that they are wearing a variety of uniform. The dark-veiled women standing to the top right of the frame are wearing the blue headdresses that had been brought in for use by the Red Cross Supply Corps in regulations issued in 1917. Others, however, are still wearing uniforms dating to before these new rules were issued. Color paint portraits of Red Cross nurses tell us that veils had previously been white. During the emergency conditions of the pandemic, presumably there were better things to worry about. The virus had first appeared in Oakland in early October, and within a fortnight of its arrival, thousands of people were sick. The city hospital was quickly overwhelmed, so the mayor ordered the recently opened Civic Auditorium, now the Kaiser Convention Center, to be converted into an overflow ward with 80 beds. All were quickly filled by seriously ill Oaklanders. There are a few photographs out there taken by local newspaper photographer Edward A. Doc Rogers. Doc was no stranger to calamity, having covered major Bay Area disasters, including the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The nurses he photographed were volunteers working for the American Red Cross. The gauze across their mouths was a precious commodity, since literally every person in the city required it. Citizens had been compelled by law to wear a face mask in public under pain of a $100 fine and 10 days in prison. The aftermath. In Oakland, swift action by the city authorities to shut schools and churches and enforce public hygiene measures meant that the local flu epidemic was under control by February 1919. Nevertheless, 1,300 citizens had died out of 675,000 American deaths in total, more than were killed during the entire Civil War. The pandemic, combined with mortality during the First World War, caused United States life expectancy to drop by 12 years. Today, flu can still be lethal, but a tragedy on the scale of 1918 has mercifully not been repeated yet. That's a little bit about Spanish flu of 1918 and 1919. Thank you for listening. I hope everyone out there is doing reasonably well. This has been What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for me. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at Smarter What, and YouTube. Username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening.